Hello friends, welcome to my annual video where I talk about some of the highlights in gaming for the past year. I'm going to talk about some of the games I've picked up. Some of them are new and were released this year, but some were released last year that I didn't get a chance to play and I've now finally got my hands on. I don't always buy games, new release games. Sometimes I wait for games to come down in price. I've been burnt way too many times buying brand new games, and so I've kind of held back unless I have a pretty good idea that I want to play it on release day. So a lot of times I'll just wait for games to come down in price, or wait for reviews at the very least before I buy them. So a few games I'll talk about in this video were actually released last year, even though this video is called Best Games of 2017. Picking up where I left off in my last videos, I'm still waiting for... I started this series in 2015, and I said that I was looking forward to Resident Evil 2, Final Fantasy VII Remake, and Shenmue 3. And that was 2 years ago, and we pretty much know the same about them now that we did back then. Other than the fact there's a lot of rumours going around, and I've talked about this at length, but Resident Evil 2 may not be a survival horror, it may not be a fixed camera game, so I'm less interested in that now. And also Final Fantasy VII may not be a turn-based game either, so it's kind of strange that they're making these games, or remaking them, but not keeping the core gameplay there, so that's strange. In fact, out of the three now, I'm actually more looking forward to Shenmue 3, because I think, I hope it'll be good anyway, so, but still no news on any of them. But let's start off with some games that I did get my hands on this year, and we'll start with Wii U games. I got two pretty good Wii U games this year. The first one was The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild. I got this, my birthday's around March, so I got this for my birthday, and we had like a joint first birthday and my birthday together, so we had like lots of kids and stuff. And we had this set up in the corner of the room, and this was like everyone just loved this. This was like everyone was glued to it, and I've been waiting for a Zelda, like a true HD Zelda, for the longest time. And I actually bought my Wii U for it about, I would say, 4 years ago now, and it was good to finally get that HD Zelda. But I do think Nintendo were a little sneaky in the way they released it, the way they cherry picked who got to review it. They sent it to a bunch of people bundled along with a brand new console, the Switch. They just gave them that console. So and Nintendo were very strict on who gets to upload their content to YouTube and who gets to review their games early. So they just sent it out to people with the console, and of course if you receive this like brand new console and everything's free of charge, and knowing in the back of your head, if I don't give this a good review, I'll never get anything from Nintendo early again. So I do think that the 10 out of 10s that it received, I don't think they were quite right. I mean, it's not even the best Zelda I've ever played. It's a good game. There were things about it I don't like, but it's definitely not a 10 out of 10 game for me. One of the things that bugged me was that instead of getting like, usually there would be about 10 main dungeons in a Zelda game. In this game there was just hundreds of mini dungeons. I actually kind of liked the mini dungeons, but they were just too short. It was like taking a piece of steak out of my mouth while I was chewing on it. Also, some people said that the weapons breaking in the game wasn't a big deal, but for me it was like a broken game mechanic. I found this one dungeon where I had to light a specific torch. Now the problem was that I didn't have any wood in my inventory, because the one wooden torch that I got at the start of the dungeon I accidentally broke. This meant that I had to warp out of the dungeon, scour the land for a torch, and I could not. It took me like 20... Okay, some people that play this game may know where they can just readily get torches. I had to run around looking for it, and it took me at least 20 minutes of searching to find a torch. I then had to warp back into the temple and then go and light it. To me this was just such a broken game mechanic, and it really... little things like this just bugged me, and these were things that you just wouldn't have found in the earlier Zelda games. Also, the fact that certain items in the game were restricted unless you owned an amiibo was infuriating to me. If I buy a game, I want to have all the content that's in the game. I don't think that there should be certain privileged people, or there should be people that hunt down stuff for £30 on eBay so that they can get Epona, for example. And of course we'll hear the, oh, it's only cosmetic argument, none of these things affect the game. Well, I want it to have Epona. I was hoping Epona would be in this game, and when I learned that I had to own a really obscure character that I can no longer even walk into the shop and buy if I wanted to. The only way I would have been able to play as Epona was if I went onto eBay and spent an additional £30, money which Nintendo don't even see. It's things like that that really bugged me about the game. And actually, just talking about it again reminded me how much that annoyed me. So there you have it, Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild, 7 out of 10. The other Wii U game that I played and really got into actually was Super Mario Maker. Now this has been out for a while. I think this was out in 2015 perhaps. I've got the little collector's edition and the amiibo because apparently everyone has to have an amiibo now. And I have to say I absolutely love this game. It is just, to me, this is Nintendo have seen what the modding community have done. There's lots of mods for old retro 2D Super Mario games. And Nintendo have seen that and just said, you know what, if this is what people want, we'll give them it and we'll sell them it. And that's what they've, but it's packaged really well here as well, I will say. I'm not saying that we're not getting value for money because you can mod it. Like, not everyone knows how to mod games. And we get the 4 classic stages of Mario in 2D, and I have to say, it's been a joy to go back and play these old 2D Mario games. With new levels, endless levels you could say, and new options. This is just a perfect example of developers looking and seeing what the community want and just giving it to them. There's also an endless supply of maps to just go and download, and there's leaderboards and everything. I'm top in the world for some games, or for some levels, some really obscure levels that probably no one else has played, but it's fun to challenge yourself against other players' times. And actually, I found a cool level where someone remade some of the older levels in games, but added like a cool twist to them and put in some weird effects and stuff. So it's just really fun to discover that sort of stuff. And we talk about replay value in a game. This has endless possibilities. Really, there's so many maps you can download. I only wish they would do this for more games. If I imagine the possibilities if like some old, like, say, Diddy Kong Racing or something, if people could make their own tracks, or GoldenEye, if there was a level editor, or even TimeSplitters had a level editor. Why don't we just bring back TimeSplitters 3 and have, you can just edit maps the way you can do here, like if you had it as user-friendly as this. One thing I've noticed about going back and playing the Wii U games is that if you live in a house where your games console is set up in your bedroom and you can play anytime you want, I'm happy for you. A little jealous, but I'm happy for you. You'll never know the struggles of someone who has their console set up in the family, in the living room, where everyone's using the TV because you just don't get to play it. That's the cool thing about the Wii U and the Switch. You can play on the screen while people are watching TV, and that is, I think that's the future. That's something I found so refreshing with the Wii U. Even though I've had it for 4 years, I haven't really been playing it much. I didn't really even have it set up. I was basically just waiting for the Zelda to come out. But I've just noticed that has been so fun this year, just playing on the screen, not having to worry about a TV, and I do think that's the future. Alright, so the next game is on the Xbox One. I said I would wait for it to come down in price, and I did, and that is Xcom 2. It came out last year, and there's some really good DLC for it this year. I've just finished the game recently, and I probably will get that DLC, but possibly not until next year. I loved the first one. This improved on it so much. It kind of made it feel a bit more intimate. Like the first one, there was far more enemies you had to deal with, but they were like easier to kill. This one, it seems to be that the enemies, there aren't as many of them, but they're much harder to kill. And I would like to praise the game on adding more variety to the enemies, and a huge improvement on the models from the previous XCOM game. But some of the enemies they added were almost too hard. I found that there were some that had basically one hit would kill your teammate, like just one move, and there was no real chance of recovering. For example, the Vipers used to be able to poison my entire team on their first move. So, and at the you encounter them very early on in the game, so you don't have med packs to heal all your guys, and it's just a slow, painful death for your whole team. I found that move was just way too overpowered. And this game has squad attachment like I have not felt since Incubation, which is one of my favourite turn-based games. Once you build your squad up, you really don't want to lose any of them. And in fact, one of the characters, I think it was the girl on my squad, actually I swear has a Northern Irish accent, so I didn't want to lose her.
Heading there now. Affirmative, covering now.
In these kind of games, there's nothing worse than building a character up only to see them die in front of you, and it's pretty much a permadeath. Sometimes you can get a character that's wounded if you carry them back, but unfortunately what ends up happening is you don't want to lose them, so you just keep reloading your last save, and it turns into a bit of a load save thing that isn't as fun to play. But there are so many features about this game I love. I would hope to do a full video of it at some point if I ever get time, maybe a tribute video or something, because there's just lots of features I love. But I may have to wait until I'll maybe get the DLC, because I hear it's almost like its own game itself. And on that note, actually, the next game I played to death was Dark Souls 3. Now I talked about this in my last video, and it was, I think I put it more or less as my top game last time, but I've got my hands on the DLC this time round, and it just expanded on the whole world again. I started playing co-op again with it, and actually the DLC lasted a really long time. I think there was probably about 20 hours at least gameplay. Some of the levels reminded me a lot of Dark Souls 1. There were some like huge open lakes that just, it felt like there was at least 100 enemies you had to kill, and the scale of some of the environments were just worth seeing on their own. Usually DLC, or a lot of times what we find these days, is that DLC is stuff that they were going to put in the game anyway, and they're just charging you extra money for it. You don't get that feeling with Dark Souls DLC. It's like, it really does feel like an addition to the main game, and that they've gone out of their way to actually create something unique. So if you're a fan of Dark Souls, make sure you pick up that DLC, well worth playing. But let's talk about a new game. White Day, a Labyrinth named Skull. It's a bit of a strange name. Now this is a remake of an old survival horror game, but it's new out this year. It just came out towards the end of the year, and a friend told me about it. I think it's on PS4, but I'm playing the Steam version. Now this is a really interesting game for me because it's an old game. It's been out for a long time on the PC, but it's a first-person survival horror game. Until I played Alien Isolation, I didn't think a first-person survival horror game would even work, and here it was all along. I just didn't know about it, but there was a game out there that was a survival horror in the first-person perspective. Now what you might ask is, well, what makes this different to other games? Why is Resident Evil 7 not a survival horror if this can be? And the answer in this is there is just no way to defend yourself. There's no weapons of any sort. It's not like there's not much ammo, it's just that there's nothing. The only way you can survive, I guess, is by running away from the enemies. So it doesn't focus on combat of any sort, it just focuses on survival. Basically think hunting grounds in first person. The other thing about this game is it doesn't hold your hand. Because it was an older game, it doesn't have like lots of tutorials. It just kind of leaves you to do figure stuff out for yourself. Nowadays games just basically tell you what to do. The puzzles in this game are much harder than the Resident Evil puzzles, but I don't think I'm going to be able to do the game justice in this short video. It will end up being on a top 10 survival horror games video if I ever make that, or possibly I'll make a mini review of it, because I think it deserves something a bit better than just this little video. But we'll move on to the next game, which was a free game on the Xbox just in the last month. I got it. It's Fortnite Battle Royale. It's just the Battle Royale mode that's free, and it's like a 100-player deathmatch, a bit like Battlegrounds PlayerUnknown. I don't feel like there's a lot of depth to this game. Like, I can't see myself playing it in a year's time, for example, other than maybe to dip in and out of, but it's definitely worth a download and a mess about on. It's a good thing to have to play with friends, and the thing about Fortnite is that it has everything I want in a first-person shooter, except for the fact that it's not a first-person shooter, it's a third-person shooter. Most people say that this game's great because it brings something new to the table, but it actually doesn't. It brings something old to the table. There's no regenerating health, and there's no real upgrade system in-game. Everyone, you could say, has a fair chance. It's all about kind of trying to find new weapons, but no one starts off at any better position than anyone else. The thing that annoys me about modern first-person shooters, likes of Call of Duty, is that you can upgrade and unlock new weapons. You can't do that in Fortnite. You just have to make do with what's available when you're scavenging. So the reason I highlight Fortnite, and I think you should download it, is that it's a step in the right direction. I think finally people and even the industry is starting to get sick of Call of Duty repainting their old games, and people are slowly starting to look for something different, and it's a nice step, it's a nice direction to be going, and I think we're going to see some very interesting games in the coming years, especially first-person shooters. Things going to have to change, I think, eventually, so I'm looking forward to that. Let's see, another game, Black Ops. I got Black Ops 3, the Zombie Chronicles came out. Another great game to play co-op. I played a little bit with my friend. We only played for a couple of nights, but this is essentially 8 of the classic maps. This is just the ultimate zombie package. I'm going to do a top 10 zombie games video this year, or in 2018, and I've always said if they were to bring a standalone Call of Duty zombie game out, I would buy it. That is essentially what this is. You have to have a physical copy of Black Ops 3, but the DLC pack Zombie Chronicles gives you 8 maps, and it's all the old ones remastered. We have that classic theatre mode that you can replay any of your matches and things like that. But I actually think this is kind of underrated. There's so much gameplay here. I've barely scratched the surface, and there's a lot of nostalgia there for me going back and playing some of the remastered maps. It's definitely one of those games that is better played with friends, and I hope to go back and play with some friends very soon. While we're talking about zombie games, one game I got for Christmas last year was Dead Rising 4. Now, I was a little disappointed with it at the time. I still haven't even really went back and played much of it since I got it, to be honest. But throughout the year I found out that Dead Rising 1 and 2 were actually remastered on the Xbox One, which now means that I have Dead Rising 4, 3, 2 and, more importantly, 1. So that is so fun to have physical copies of all the Dead Rising games on one console, and I have to say I've had a lot of fun playing the remaster of Dead Rising 1. In fact, if anything, it's made me realise what it is about Dead Rising 4 I don't like. Stalin said that if you kill one person it's a tragedy, but if you kill 1 million people it's a statistic. That is in some ways how I feel about Dead Rising. What Stalin was really saying was that the human mind just can't process that much tragedy. And with Dead Rising, I think that the human brain can't process so many zombies. Once you get to a certain number of zombies on screen, it's much less of an individual zombie that you're fighting and more of a one big zombie enemy that has numerous parts to it. I expected that Dead Rising 1 wouldn't be much of an upgrade on the Xbox One, but what I didn't expect was just how much nostalgia I had for the game. It's actually getting harder and harder not to call Xbox 360 games retro, especially the earlier ones that were released that are over 10 years old. And with that in mind, the next game on the list, it's actually, we're going to get on to like what I've bought. These are gifts I've bought myself for Christmas. I've got 2, I'm actually kind of 3, but the Bioshock Collection, I've wanted this for a while, and I finally got it this year and played a little bit of it. And again, like Dead Rising 1, it was such a surprise just how much nostalgia I had for this game. I'm specifically talking about the first Bioshock. It's much more sinister than I remember. I remember it being dark, but not just quite as dark as it is. I also forgot just how much it feels like a collectathon, like the first-person version of Banjo-Kazooie. I feel like as more time passes, game developers have forgotten how to make rooms interesting. It's so fun just going into a room in Bioshock and searching for things. And it reminded me how much fun it was going into rooms in Resident Evil games and searching for items, or Metal Gear Solid 2 and trying to find hidden things. Another game that was free that I was thinking about getting at the time, it was Warhammer End Times Vermintide. Some people say that the gameplay in Vermintide was a little like Left 4 Dead. It's not a little like Left 4 Dead, it's exactly like Left 4 Dead. It's so much like Left 4 Dead, I'm surprised Valve aren't trying to sue, and that it's even on Steam. It's like when you watch a movie based on a true story. At the start it says this movie is based on a true story, but the names, places and dates have been changed. Vermintide should start with, this game was based on Left 4 Dead, all names and places have been changed in the hopes we don't get sued by Valve. And I don't even care that it's a rip-off. If Valve aren't going to make Left 4 Dead 3, then someone else might as well. It's just really fun to be able to play a game with the same mechanics as the Left 4 Dead series again. It's actually probably one of the best co-op games I've played all year. Another game I bought myself was Wolfenstein 2, what's it called? The New Colossus, and this is one that I haven't even taken out of the shrink wrap. This is a Christmas present really to myself. That I always like to have a game at Christmas, and I'll probably try and install this the night before Christmas and play it while I'm off work. Looking forward to this actually. It's got a lot of good reviews. I'm looking forward to it seems like it might be a classic first-person shooter, so that's what I'm hoping for. Two other things that I just want to mention briefly that was sent to me by a good friend of mine called Foofy11. He sent me this really nice old school keyboard, and I've been looking for one for a while actually, because I want to go back and start playing some old PC games, and there are a few things that I want to be able to use that for, but I'll talk about that a little bit more once I start up those PC videos. But I mentioned it to him and he showed me his keyboard, and he just was really kind and posted it over to me. And then recently, it came just in time for Christmas and just in time for this video. He said that I really need to play RoboCop for the Commodore 64. When I started up my Commodore 64 series, he was like, you need to play this game. And I'd never even played it before, but now I have no excuse because he sent me over. Really nice of him to do that. And it's in super good condition as well. In fact, it's in such good condition that it's actually the label hasn't even been removed. I don't know where he got it from, but I don't want to remove it. I don't know if he tells me to open it, I'm going to open it, but I feel like I shouldn't open it for some reason because it's never been opened. And I have an emulator, so if I want, I can emulate this game. I hope, anyway, I think so. I can emulate this on my Commodore 64. I love the font on this box as well. This font was heavily used in the Commodore 64 era. It's like a chrome effect. Like if you had like a fender on a car and you were in the desert, that's what I imagine would be reflected in that chrome. And it's so cool looking, so retro, and incredible condition this game is in. And actually looking at the screenshots of this game at the back, it doesn't even look like a Commodore 64 game. It looks too good to be a Commodore 64 game. But the reason for that is that it's discs. So there's floppy disks in here, so it would require a disk drive, and any of the disc games would have been better quality than, or graphically, than the tapes generally. You could put more memory on a floppy disk. We didn't actually have a floppy disk player back when I had the Commodore 64. We only had tape players, and it has the cartridge port. So I'm looking forward to playing this and trying it out, because graphically it looks like something it looks like Terminator from the Game Gear. That's the kind of graphics that it looks like. So thanks a lot, Fifi11, good friend of mine. We go way back to whenever I started out on YouTube. We met each other right at the very start. I think we both started up our YouTube channels early on. He is also on Twitch streaming, so go and check him out. It's just like Twitch.com/Foof811, and it's FOOF811. and he's on YouTube as well. So thanks really for sending that. It was really nice. I'm going to talk about one more thing I picked up this year. It's a little handheld console. It's, I think, the best thing I've picked up all year. It's just, I absolutely fell in love with this when I got it. And it kind of goes back to whenever I was talking at the start of this video on the Wii U about how mobile games, like I remember people saying mobile games are the future, and I was like, no way, like mobile games, playing on a mobile phone is ridiculous. And I like having a screen and all the rest of it, but as more time passes, I'm realizing, and the fact that I now have my console where the family TV is, I don't get to play as much. I'm more and more finding that playing on something handheld is actually much better. I think you guys know what I'm talking about. I've picked up a PSP. You thought I was going to say a Switch, but I picked up a PSP. This is a mod at PSP, and it allows me to play PlayStation 1 games, Nintendo 64 games, Game Boy Advance games, and of course PSP games. To name but a few, the list of emulators for this thing is unreal. It even lets me emulate old Sega games. I can emulate the Sega Game Gear. I've been wanting to get back into Sega Game Gear for a while now, and this is like a really nice alternative. The Game Gear, the original consoles are a little hard to get one that's working because of the capacitors, and this is a really, really nice alternative. I can play on this. But also the PS1 emulator, having a PS1 in my pocket is just unbelievable. It's having it portable, being able to play it whenever I want to, not having to worry about a TV. But also what I can do is I can play the PS1 games on my PSP. I can save them as I'm out and about, and then when I get back home, I can actually then convert those save files on my PC and play on an emulator on my PC. But I've also wanted to go back and play some of the Castlevania games, and I love Symphony of the Night, so of course Symphony of the Night is on the PS1, but that kind of gameplay, those RPG 2D games, Symphony of the Night was the first one, but then they started making them on the Game Boy Advance and on the Nintendo DS. So there's 3 on the Game Boy Advance, and I can emulate all of them perfectly on my PSP. Been having so much fun going back and playing them. As a big fan of Symphony of the Night, it's just great to go back and play these ones. I think I've played all of the Nintendo DS ones, and I have a Nintendo DS anyway with them on it, so I don't really need my PSP for that anyway. But I don't think I've played many of the Game Boy Advance ones. Like I mentioned, the Nintendo 64 emulator, in general, emulating the Nintendo 64 is difficult. There's compatibility issues, but Mario 64 works, I would say, flawlessly. It's works really, really well, so that's going to be fun to go back and play. I couldn't get my hands on an SNES Mini this year because they were underproduced, so emulation on my PSP was a perfect alternative for me. I've downloaded lots of my favourite SNES games, and I have a really great library for my PSP now. Nintendo may think that understocking is a great selling tactic, but because of this they're losing out in sales from people like me. Grand Theft Auto Vice City Stories is a prequel to Vice City on the PS2. What I love about this is that it's the same graphics and quality as the PS2 game, but I get the portability of having it on my PSP. So in some ways this is like having a PS2 in my pocket as well as a PS1. Tony Hawk's Underground 2 Remix is another one of these games where they've taken a well-known PS2 game and made it playable on the PSP. The Tony Hawk's games were some of my favourites on the PS2, so I'm really glad that this is now playable on my PSP. I've been meaning to go back and play the Tony Hawk's games for a while now, and it's the perfect game to just pick up and play for 20 minutes and then put down again. So what was my favourite game that came out this year? I'm going to have to give it to Zelda Breath of the Wild. But that says more about 2018 than it does about this game. I don't buy a lot of new games, so it could be something to do with that too. But I just don't think there was many other contenders to give it to. Like I said, this game was not perfect. It's not even my favourite Zelda game. In terms of what games I'm looking forward to this year, Vermintide 2, I'll definitely be looking out for that. I'm really excited. I think it's actually coming out early, first quarter of the year. Obviously I've got my Wolfenstein to play, so I'm looking forward to trying that out. But I'd love to hear what you guys think, what you're looking forward to, particularly in case I do miss a lot of games, so I'd like to know what you guys thought was your best game of the year, and hopefully I'll check out for next year, and it'll be in my next video. Thanks for watching, guys, and thanks again to Fifi11 for sending some presents over. That was really nice, and I'll see you next year.